Alright guys, the Comics Kid 2099 here. Today, I want to talk a little bit about the book A Game of Thrones, written by George R.R. Martin. I have talked about this book a little bit here and there, but I haven't actually delved into the book itself. I recently reread this. I had read it once before, at least once before. I can't remember if this was my second time reading it or my third time reading it. I've only read the first 3 Game of Thrones books, and book 2 and book 3, I've only read them once each. With this one, I can't remember if this was my second time reading it or my third time reading it. But anyway, this is the beginning of the A Song of Ice and Fire franchise by George R. R. Martin, which is probably the thing that he is most well known for. Martin has been a writer since the 80s, maybe even the late 70s, but this, I think, came out in 1996, and this is probably, like I said, what he is most well known for. And if you have watched the TV show Game of Thrones, and you haven't read the books, and you're thinking to yourself, the show was fine, I don't have to read the books because I've already seen the show, I'm going to say, I think you're wrong. I think you should read the books. I have watched the first season of Game of Thrones, and I've read this at least twice now, and I think this is much better than the TV show. The thing that kept jumping out to me reading this book this time is that there is so much more nuance with this book because you are inside the heads of all of these different characters, and that is a luxury that the TV show cannot afford. With the TV show, you're pretty much seeing all of the events that happened in this book, but you aren't really in the heads of these characters. So when I was watching Game of Thrones Season 1 a while back, I kept thinking, yeah, this is pretty much hitting the high notes of what happened in the book, but I don't really feel like I'm immersed in the world like I was when I was reading the book. You get pages and pages where you are seeing the inner thoughts of some of these characters, and you just don't get that with the TV show. And so even though the show, I think, does a pretty good job bringing those characters to life, I don't feel like you get to know those characters nearly as much as you do when you read the book. If you haven't watched the TV show, if you've only heard of Game of Thrones but you don't really know what it's about, it's going to be kind of hard to explain. Basically, the story starts with the Stark family. They live way up in the north. You have Eddard, his wife Catelyn, his illegitimate son from before, or it's like right after he married Catelyn, he went off to war and then came back with a baby. That's Jon Snow. So there's those 3, and then Catelyn and Eddard's children. You have Robb, Bran, Rickon, Arya, and Sansa. So they all live at Winterfell, as well as another kid that Eddard has kind of sort of adopted named Theon. And then the king of the 7 Kingdoms, Robert Baratheon, he comes to visit his old friend Eddard and says, hey, recently the king, the hand to the king, he died. And the hand to the king was someone that both Robert and Eddard were friends with when they were young. He's recently died, so I want you to become my new hand to the king. And so that's kind of our inciting incident for this massive tome and this entire series, really. And so from that point, the Stark family kind of splits up. Eddard takes his 2 daughters with him back down to King's Landing. That's the capital of the 7 Kingdoms. Catelyn is going to stay at Winterfell with the boys. And then Bran Stark, he accidentally catches the Queen and her brother having sex. And then Jaime Lannister, the Queen's brother, pushes him out a window. So then Bran is paralyzed. He can't move. And then while Eddard and his daughters are away, there is a hired mercenary who tries to kill Bran. And so then Catelyn, she goes out and she is trying to warn her husband, hey, the Lannisters, they probably were behind this because, like I said, it's going to be really hard to talk about all this. Catelyn had gotten a letter from her sister who was married to the Hand of the King who's now dead. And the letter said that the Lannisters were responsible for his death. And then after the attempted assassination of her son, somehow these guys are thinking maybe the Lannisters were behind this also. So Catelyn goes and tries to warn her husband. And then there's this other guy at King's Landing who she used to know. He says, yeah, the Lannisters, they own this knife. And so then Catelyn, she's back on the road towards Winterfell, and then she sees Tyrion Lannister. That is the younger brother of the Queen. And then she kidnaps Tyrion, and this kicks off a big war between the Starks and the Lannisters that eventually boils over into a huge war between pretty much everyone on the continent. Because Robert Baratheon, he eventually dies during a boar hunt, and he has 2 younger brothers named Renly and Stannis, and then both of them think, well, I should sit on the throne, because by this point, spoilers, Ed Stark finds out that that the king and queen, they have 3 children, and none of them are actually the king's children. They are all the queen and her brother's children. Jaime, he's the one who pushed Bran out the window. And so by this point, Eddard, he knows that, and then he is arrested for treason before he can tell anyone, but somehow Stannis Baratheon, he already knew this. So now you have Joffrey, who sits on the throne. He is the oldest prince. He is now heir to the throne, but then his 2 uncles are both like, yeah, we think we should have the throne. And so that's 3 kings right there who are all going to be duking it out. And then by this point, Robb Stark, he has called the banners. All the families who live up north are rallying to him because his father has been arrested for treason. His younger sister Sansa is kind of being held prisoner. And all of this is kind of happening because Catelyn kidnapped Tyrion, and then Tyrion eventually is let go. But by that point, it's too late. War is already started by the time Tyrion has been captured. And so Robb Stark, he is calling his banners to go to war with the Lannisters so that his family can be released. And then, spoilers, again, huge spoilers all across the board. Eddard is eventually beheaded because he had said that Joffrey was not the true heir to the throne. And then when he confessed and said, I was wrong, Joffrey still had him beheaded because Joffrey is a psychotic little turd. But then I'm trying to think of what all happened here. Basically, by the time you get to the beginning, I'm going to spoil a little bit of book 2. By the time you get to the beginning of book 2, you have 5 people who all potentially think that they should be the king. You have Renly, Stannis, Joffrey, and then near the end of this book, you also have everyone in the north basically says, we don't really care about the Baratheons and the Lannisters. We live so far up north, those guys aren't really doing anything when we pledge allegiance to them. They're not protecting us because they live so far away. So everyone in the north, they say that they want to pledge allegiance to Robb Stark as the new king of the north. That's after Eddard dies. So you have Robb Stark, and then there's another guy, I'll talk about him, it's Theon's dad. He kind of feels like he should also secede from the 7 kingdoms, and he gets in on the action as well. So it's the Battle of the 5 Kings, I think is what they call it. And then also, there's a character called Daenerys Targaryen, because long ago, like 15 years before the events of this book, Robert was not king. There was the Targaryen dynasty. They were the ones in charge. And then Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, he ran off with Robert Baratheon's fiancée, who was Ed Stark's sister. He ran off with her. It's kind of an Iliad situation where maybe he kidnapped her, maybe they ran off willingly together, kind of like Paris and Helen from the Iliad, or the Trojan War. And so Robert starts Robert's Rebellion because his fiancée has been, in his mind, kidnapped and raped, and he wants revenge. And so all the Targaryens are killed off except for Daenerys Targaryen and her older brother Viserys. And they are on the other side of the planet in a continent called Essos. And basically, Daenerys is married off to this barbarian guy called Khal Drogo so that Viserys can get a whole bunch of soldiers and horses so that he can wage war on Robert Baratheon. And basically, that part of the book is almost completely divorced from everything else that's happening here. Daenerys' subplot is very slow burning, but it does have stuff to do with what's going on here. At one point, Robert Baratheon finds out that Daenerys is pregnant, so he says he will give a kingship, or it's like he will give a title to whoever kills Daenerys. And so that almost happens at one point, and then that spurs Khal Drogo to want to take action. So all of that is connected. There is a character with Daenerys who is, his dad is connected with the Night's Watch. I haven't even talked about the Night's Watch. I really hope anyone watching this video is not too confused by this video. So when the Stark family kind of split up, Catelyn, she absolutely hates Ed Stark's illegitimate son, Jon Snow. She hates him because he is a reminder that her husband was unfaithful to her. And she even says to herself at one point that if her husband had fathered a whole bunch of illegitimate kids but left them all wherever they were born, she would have been fine with that. But the fact that he took this baby back with him home and then acknowledged that this kid was his kid, she did not like that. So she hates Jon Snow. So when her husband and his 2 daughters go to King's Landing, she says, I am not staying here with your illegitimate son. He has to go somewhere. And Eddard says, well, he can't come with me to King's Landing. That's not really a place for an illegitimate kid. So he goes and joins the Night's Watch with Ed's brother, Benjen. Benjen has already been part of the Night's Watch, but he was visiting, and so he's going back north, and then he's taking Jon with him. The Night's Watch, their job is basically to patrol the Wall, which is this really tall, really long wall that protects the southern part of the planet from wildly wildlings and the others. In the show, the others are called the White Walkers. But the wildlings, they are basically wild people who live north of the Wall, and they feel like they are entitled to something. The book doesn't really get into what the wildlings want at this time. We will get more of them in the later books. But anyway, the others, they are introduced. It's actually in the prologue of this book. There are a few members of the Night's Watch who are out looking for something, and then they are attacked by some of the others. And most people in the series, they do not believe in the others. They are just fairy tales as far as they are concerned. And so Jon Snow, he joins the Night's Watch, and the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, his son is actually allied with Daenerys. The Daenerys stuff is connected with everything else that's going on, but if you were to take out one character or one subplot from this book without affecting everything else, it would be the Daenerys subplot. It is the least connected. It is connected, but it's the least connected. So I like this book. Like I said, this feels so much richer than the TV show for me. The TV show, the first season, I think is 8-hour-long episodes, but it feels like it is just the Great Illustrated Classic version of this. I feel like you are getting so much more when you are reading this book than when you are watching the first season of the show. And I don't want to make it sound like I am completely dogging on the show, because there are some things the show did that I actually like. There were a couple of scenes in the show that I was expecting when I was reading this again that don't happen in the books. There is one part where Jory Castle, who works for Ed, he is going and he wants a favor from Jaime Lannister, and there's a conversation there that I really like that's not in the book. There is a conversation between Robert Baratheon and his wife in the show that's not in the book. There's one time where Robert Baratheon is kind of belittling Jaime, and then Sir Barristan the Bold is there, and Jaime, I think Robert is asking Jaime, who was the first person you killed, or something like that. What was your first tournament like? I don't remember what it was, but there's a moment where in the show where Barristan, he kind of is like, oh yeah, I remember that, and there's like this slight moment of like kinship between Barristan and Jaime, and that's not in the book. In the book, actually, when Barristan is basically fired, he really does not like Jaime. He talks about, if any of you are going to serve under Jaime Lannister, then you are not true knights. So there are things that the show does that I like that the book does not do. But overall, if I had to choose one or the other, choose the books or choose the TV show, I would choose the TV show. I think that, I'm sorry, I would choose the books. I think that the books, they have a lot more texture of what's going on. It's the same events, but you're getting a lot more out of it when you're reading the books, at least in my opinion. Now, there are, I think, 8 point of view characters. Basically, what they will do, like the very first chapter of the book, is from the point of view of Bran. That is like the middle child, or one of the younger children of Ed and Catelyn. And so you have, let's see, Ed, Catelyn, Sansa, Arya, Bran, Tyrion Lannister, Daenerys, and Jon Snow. Those are your point of view characters. And none of these characters are 100% good or 100% evil. And that is interesting because when you're reading this, at first you might be thinking, yeah, I'm really on that person's side. And then they might do something and you're like, oh, okay, well, it's understandable, but I don't like that person as much now. Catelyn is a really good example. I don't like Catelyn, but just about everything that she does is understandable. She pretty much kicks off the War of the Five Kings when she decides that she is going to kidnap Tyrion Lannister. And she does it because she has been led to believe by her sister that Tyrion is responsible for her son's death, or near death. And then that stuff kind of falls out of her hands. She loses her prisoner because of her sister. She does a lot of stuff. Once she rendezvous with her son, who by that point is calling the Bannisters to go to war with the Lannisters, there are several moments where she is saying to herself, yeah, that's probably not a good idea for my son to do that, but I can't call him out in front of everyone because that would make him look weak. So she is an interesting character, even if I don't like her. I don't like her because of how she treats Jon Snow, but I understand it. If my spouse came back with a kid who wasn't mine, I probably wouldn't like that kid either. Jon Snow and Sansa Stark are my 2 least favorite characters in this book. Jon Snow is interesting because when you see a character who is treated so horribly and doesn't feel like he belongs with everyone else, it's kind of like the Harry Potter syndrome. Harry Potter grew up in a closet, was raised by people who hated him, and then he finds out that he is a celebrity and he's special. And that is kind of sort of what's going on with Jon Snow. There is more to this character than meets the eye. I'm not going to talk about that here because it's not really relevant in this book. But Jon Snow is kind of like that. He's treated pretty horribly by his father's wife. He doesn't ever really feel like he belongs with the other Stark children. A few of them he gets along with, Bran, Robb, and Arya. But it doesn't give you the impression that Sansa likes him very much either. And even when his father loves him, he is still kind of distanced. His father is closer with his other children than he is with Jon. But Jon is constantly whining about how life isn't fair when you're an illegitimate kid. They use another word. And then whenever he gets to the wall, suddenly he thinks, well, I should be promoted. I should go out on a ranging trip with my uncle. And his uncle says, no, you just got here. You haven't earned it yet. And then like he's beating up people who are, it's in fencing practice sort of, and he thinks that he's better than everyone. It takes pretty much most of the book for Jon Snow to stop being a little turd and, hey, you know, I need to treat everyone a little nicer. I need to stop being this whiny little brat. But eventually Jon Snow becomes a character that I like a little bit more. But this book, I did not care for him. And Sansa, the problem with Sansa is that she thinks that life is a fairy tale. She thinks everything is going to just be pretty songs and birds singing and rainbows and everything beautiful. And she sees some pretty horrible stuff that her fiance or soon-to-be fiance does, and then she writes it off as, oh, he was just in a bad mood, or he's not as bad as what everyone else says. And it's like, your boyfriend threatened to kill this kid, and you're saying that it's not really his fault. And so Sansa is kind of like, every time, the first time I was reading this book especially, anytime I would get to a Sansa chapter, I would say, oh no, I don't want to read another Sansa chapter. By the end of the book, I think she has finally broken out of this, oh, life isn't a pretty song mentality. And so it's going to be a little better reading Sansa stuff moving forward, starting in book 2. So if you pick this book up, if you haven't watched the show and you're still here for some reason, and you say, oh, I really don't like Sansa, I really don't like Jon, keep reading, power through it. I think all the other characters are better. I like reading everything else in the book. Daenerys is okay. She's kind of just there. Like I said, you could pretty much remove her portions of the book and it wouldn't change anything else, but she's alright. She doesn't do a whole lot in this book, but until the very end. I won't talk about that. But if you get through this and you're like, there are a few characters I really hate and I don't want to keep reading, keep going, because the good thing is you might have a Sansa chapter that might be 10 pages long, and then you won't have another Sansa chapter for like 50 more pages. So then you'll have other characters that you like a lot more. So that's about all that I have to say about A Game of Thrones. I probably haven't said anything worthwhile here. Everyone on the planet already knows this story from the show, so I really probably haven't convinced you to go read the book, but I really like this book. I think this is better than the season that I have watched. So that is all that I have to say about this book. I hope you guys liked this video, and if you did, be sure to check me out in the future, as I will do some other videos. In the meantime, have a great rest of your day. Catch you later.